Not to praise Trump personally, Russian propagandists have received new instructions from the Kremlin on how to talk about US President Donald Trump. The reason for this shift is the ongoing negotiations between the US and Russia. Unlike previous American presidents, radical criticism of Trump is now off limits. According to the Verstka media, citing sources close to the Putin administration, propagandists have not received strict directives to present the supposed warming of US-Russia relations in a particular way. However, they have been ordered to maintain a so-called balance in their reporting, as the negotiations could ultimately stall.
An employee of a major state media outlet described the new content policy as follows: "We don't make promises about the end of the special military operation. We don't give any deadlines. The main thing is that they have made contact, and we are ready to listen." An insider working for the state TV channel said that there are no instructions to force anything. It is only necessary to balance Trump with statements from the Russian side. From the Verstka article.
Every authoritarian regime needs an external enemy. For Russia, this enemy has always been the West, and now specifically Europe. During a recent meeting between US President and French President Emmanuel Macron discussed the possibility of NATO spending troops to Ukraine. In response, Russian propaganda outlets launched a wave of insults directed at Macron. However, experts believe that the Kremlin's temporary thaw towards the US will not last long.
They are not rushing to embrace Trump, fully understanding that today things are one way, and tomorrow they may be completely different. The general directive is to leave Americans alone for now, focus on the British, the French, the Germans, but don't touch the Americans. During Trump's first presidency, Margarita Simonian once declared she would drive around Moscow waving an American flag in celebration. However, even back then, Trump's presidency did not turn out well for Russian propagandists.
After Macron and Trump's negotiations, Putin immediately gave an interview to Russian media. The Russian dictator claimed that Russia supposedly has more resources than Ukraine. Russia decided to become a raw materials supplier to the United States after propagandists mocked the negotiation process between the United States and Ukraine on rare earth metals. In this agreement, Putin seems to have seen prospects for major deals with the US.
People are confused. The blatant sale of rare earth metals and the possibility of handing them over to the U.S., it's too much. Some pro-Kremlin bloggers support it, others don't. Many still don't grasp what's happening. But the overall reaction is delayed because, historically, no American president has ever truly benefited Russia.
Russian propaganda is now contradicting itself and falling apart. The objectives of the so-called special military operation are increasingly unclear, putting pro-war mobilization efforts at risk. Since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine and the imposition of Western sanctions, Russian media has insisted that domestic production could replace Western goods. Sanctions have included bans on Russian oil and petroleum imports, asset freezes for major Russian companies, financial restrictions and export bans on technology and dual-use goods. As a result, Russia now lacks airplane components, military equipment repair is idle, and losses from sanctions are at all-time high. In 2024, the budget deficit in Russia amounted to 3.5 billion rubles.
Russia's economic situation is dire. The so-called lifeline Trump is throwing may well turn into an anchor. We no longer understand the logic, why this war was fought for 3 years, why 350,000 men were mobilized and sent to the trenches, why over 1 million signed military contracts, why there are hundreds of thousands of dead, wounded, and missing, and why millions have become refugees.
According to Bloomberg, Putin's special representative for foreign economic cooperation, Kirill Dmitriev, is using business proposals to pressure the US into a deal favorable to the Kremlin. The goal is to lift sanctions on Russia. Dmitriev proposed that Putin sell around 2 million tons of Siberian aluminium to the US in exchange for Trump lifting import restrictions. He also suggested that Russian companies could set up joint ventures with American firms for aluminium production. Reported by Sergei Kulias, Victoria Smirnova, UATV News. The White House remains determined to finalize a deal between Washington and Kyiv on rare earth metals. Both the Ukrainian and American sides confirm that negotiations are ongoing.
Trump wants rare earths because the American economy is highly dependent on Chinese sources, and it's an economic and national security risk. So, reason number one. Reason number two is that there are now so many American companies who are able to mine and produce rare earths within the US. Reason number two. And reason number three is that, I mean, there is Ukraine, and we have these commodities right there. And in order to avoid that the Chinese will take over Ukrainian rare earths commodities and build up potential mines there, it's an option for the Americans. And reason number four is to make the Ukrainians pay for the American military support.
However, during a meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron, Donald Trump stated that the US is also considering economic agreements with Russia, specifically regarding access to Russian rare earth resources. Trump did not provide details, but in response to the White House's statements, the Kremlin convened a meeting to discuss the development of Russia's rare earth metals sector.
I've spoken to President Putin, and my people are dealing with him constantly, and his people in particular. And they want to do something. I mean, that's what I do. I do deals. My whole life is deals. That's all I know is deals.
The extraction of rare earth metals that the Kremlin leader has offered the US in response to Trump's statements is controlled by a close Putin ally. Previously, this individual used a presidential decree to nationalize Russia's largest rare earth producer, transferring control to the state corporation Rosatom. This was reported by investigative journalists from the media project Current Time and Radio Free Europe investigative unit Sistema. According to their findings, Rosatom has close ties to Mikhail Kovalchuk, a key member of its Scientific and Technological Council. Meanwhile, the corporation's supervisory board is chaired by Sergei Kiriyenko, a longtime associate of Kovalchuk.
Instead of becoming a bridge between China and the West, Russia has turned into a battlefield where these global players fight over its resources. Putin's statements about offering rare earth metals to the U.S. are far from what the so-called Russian Ivan believed he was fighting for, thinking he was battling NATO, when in reality he was dying so that Putin could sell off Russia to the West and China. The Kremlin is auctioning off national wealth because Putin has already drained all other resources to fund his war. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council, on Telegram.
Meanwhile, as negotiations between Kyiv and Washington continue, media reports have surfaced suggesting that the European Union has also proposed a rare earth deal with Ukraine. However, officials in Brussels have denied these claims.
Since 2021, the EU has a partnership on critical raw materials with Ukraine, formalized through our Memorandum of Understanding. So this dates back 4 years ago. As with all the EU critical raw materials partnerships that we have, this cooperation is not only about securing supply chains for the EU, but also about fostering local value creation and capacity building in partner countries, ensuring mutual benefits. Now, as you see, this is really here about cooperation with Ukraine and not about any sort of competition with the US.
At the same time, President Volodymyr Zelensky insists that any agreement signed by Kyiv must include security guarantees, otherwise it would be meaningless. A previously U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent admitted in an interview with Fox News that the deal proposed by Washington does not include direct military guarantees.
Our teams are already working productively with the U.S. on economic agreement, which we hope to sign in Washington. And President Trump, we would really like to hear from you, because all our people, all our families are very worried. Will there be support from America? Will America be the leader of the free world? And I want to be very honest with you. For our people, for life in general, it's so important that American support, American assistance remains. And really, I believe we can be just as effective in securing real guarantees for peace.
Furthermore, President Zelensky has urged his American counterpart Donald Trump to meet as soon as possible to discuss guarantees for Ukraine's security and peace. He made this appeal during a meeting of G7 leaders in which the US president participated virtually. Reported by Serhiy Kulas, Larissa Petruk, UATV News.